So today we'll do 4 stages of Kubernetes. It's nice that no one actually complained, because on your schedule it was supposed to say 5, right? But the way that it works with these things is basically you submit your talk, and 5 stages sounded really nice, right? You basically have click yourself a cluster, and then we'll talk about making your own cluster, and we'll talk about multi-cluster, and then federation, and then hosted control planes. The problem is, later when I actually wrote the talk and did a dry run, it turns out you can't actually fit 5 stages in 75 minutes. At least not if you want to have some questions at the end, so now it's 4 stages. That is why. Resources are going to be all on GitHub. There is, on the last slide, going to be a QR code. You can scan it, you can go to the GitHub, all the code and the manifests and everything, so you don't basically really have to type along. And then we'll get right into it. Who's actually talking to you about the stages? That is me. I'm Rick. I'm currently a senior site reliability engineer at Stackit. In case you don't know Stackit, we're basically doing cloud, just like AWS and GCP and Azure. Just that we're basically doing it in Germany and from Europe. Before that, I did other things. I wrote a book for Loads and Giggles about OpenShift. I did Kubernetes for the eBay Classifieds group. I did OpenShift, so pretty much Kubernetes as well for Red Hat, Kubernetes for TomTom, Kubernetes for... You kind of get the point, right? I basically did a lot of Kubernetes sometimes. And then I also run Kubernetes in my basement on a 46U Prime Center, essentially. Because obviously not enough Kubernetes at work, you need Kubernetes at home as well. What's going to happen today? Intro is pretty much what we did now. We're going to talk real quick about the stages and why we actually want different kind of stages. Then we're going to talk about fully managed Kubernetes, so what I just called click yourself a cluster. Stage 2 is basically you're going to make yourself your own cluster, or how you can make yourself your own cluster. Then we'll talk about multi-cluster, and then we will talk about hosted control planes and clusters as resources. And then hopefully, if everything goes as expected, there should be more than enough time for a QA at the end. I'll say some stuff about QA when we get there. So save your questions preferably for the end, and then as I said, there should be enough time planned here. So why the stages, right? Why not just say one thing, one way of doing Kubernetes is good enough? Well, the thing is, you basically have different kind of use cases, essentially, right? So how fast do I need my cluster? Is it like, I want to make a demo now. I need a Kubernetes cluster right now. Would maybe be nice if I could just get one without thinking a lot about my configuration and customization. Or do I need like hyper customized everything? Then I probably need to do something myself. How many clusters do you need, right? As I said, one cluster, one demo, really nice. Or am I basically a globally distributed company and I need a gazillion different clusters? How should traffic come into my cluster or into multiple clusters? And then respectively also, how do I deploy my clusters? How do I manage my clusters? So there's a bunch of different reasons why you would want different kind of approaches to Kubernetes. And I called them stages, but essentially they're not necessarily one being better than the other. They're just kind of different approaches, and sometimes you get a little bit of a maturity overhead. I try to order them in a way that their stages goes up, means effort to get the cluster goes up. And that's why essentially we're starting stage 1 with fully managed clusters. So on a fully managed cluster, you basically ask your cloud provider of choice, hey, I need a Kubernetes cluster and I need it now. Usually really fast ramp up time. You essentially don't really need to know anything about Kubernetes to this point, other than that you want it. You click it or use the command line, or ideally later on you would use something like infrastructure as code to get your cluster out of it. The implementation that the cloud providers do is slightly different for each one under the hood, but what matters for you when you do this is basically just you get a Kubernetes cluster and you get a Kubernetes API that you can basically work with, right? Not super great to do on bare metal, honestly. You can't really, ask IPMI on your server to give you a Kubernetes cluster. That's not really how that works. Private cloud is a bit of a different story, but it had a bit too many quirks to really demo this here, so we're not going to talk a lot about private cloud, honestly. And you sometimes trade a bit of feature completeness really for the ease of use, and that you can essentially throw certain problems overboard to the cloud provider. So that does make sense in some use cases, and in some doesn't. As I said, really, if you just need a cluster fast, that's usually working really well. Or also, what I've seen people do in the past is basically, I have something that is running centrally, that is serving a lot of other use cases, and I don't really want to have the responsibility for this, right? So for example, you have your central monitoring and observability stack, and that needs to go somewhere, and you don't actually want to take the blame for when it goes down. You can basically say, yeah, cloud provider guarantees me 99.9% reliability on my Kubernetes API, and so you basically can just always expect it to work. Usually, you pay a little bit of a premium for getting a managed service. Kind of depends a bit on your cloud provider of choice. So, before demo goes on, as I mentioned, I work for Stackit, and that has a giant benefit. I basically get everything for free on Stackit, right? So, as opposed to going bankrupt by doing everything on another cloud provider, if I launch now 10 different VMs here, I basically just use Stackit to spin up managed Kubernetes clusters later on the VMs and everything. It should all work simultaneously on all the other cloud providers, right? So AWS, GCP, Azure, I don't really need to name them all, I guess. Okay, so what you would do basically for if you just want, that's actually looking good. If you just want a given Kubernetes cluster, you could basically just go here and say, create me a cluster, and then you give it a cluster, and you just call it, demo. We don't need this and this. We do somewhat need nodes. I've asked one node should be good enough for us. We're not really planning to do a lot of things, and then you just select your flavor, and you go all the way to the bottom. Really, no one actually really cares. Like this, and then you just order a cluster. And that's basically all you really needed to do, right? As I said, you really don't need to know anything about Kubernetes other than that you want it. This is going to take 1 hot minute now to actually be ready. So while we are waiting for this, we're going to look into some code actually. So, code good? Yeah, code good. So, I could basically always just tell you that it would be great to deploy apps to it, but for some reason it seemed to me like it would make sense to actually have a bit of an application that we can later on deploy, where we can basically see the differences, or maybe also not see differences. We'll roundabout find out. I'm assuming not everyone is super familiar with Go, so it's a pretty straightforward thing. Here we basically define a bunch of command line flags, right? So that there's our application has a flag for port, for interface, for stage, and for version. Then we initialize a logger. Yeah, I would like to. Hang on, we can do this differently. Bigger, better? Nice. Oh. Okay, so what did I say? Yeah, right. So basically here a bunch of command line flags, right, that we can use later on. And then we initialize just a logger. Here we have a little function that is trying to get us our host name. That is basically just so if we later on deploy it into two different clusters, for example, we also see that it logs, and you really don't just have to believe my word, but you can actually see from the output that it is running on different hosts. And then there's basically one little handler so that the app is going to respond on the root context, so just on slash. And then here we basically define what it's supposed to respond to us, right? So it's basically just going to say, oh, it still says 4. Well, never mind that it still says 5. So it's basically going to respond to us with the host name that it got, stage, version. That is something that we give in via the command line flags. And then listen and serve, so it's basically just listening on the addresses that we want, right? So really something simple, but essentially we do need something that we can deploy to places. So in a world where you basically did not have Kubernetes, you would just do, the Docker file. Also here, relatively simple. So we have a multi-stage Docker file. Stage 1, basically, we just copy everything over, build a binary, and then stage 2, we basically get the build binary from stage 1, and then be able to run it, right? So essentially, give it the build context. There you go. Right? So that would basically be how we would do right now, and then we can do without Kubernetes. We can basically do docker run -p, use 8080, and then run my app. There we go. We basically didn't give it a stage right now, which is, well, I didn't really give it any command line flags, so it just does what it's supposed to do. So what I did here in order to get this to my Kubernetes cluster later on, basically I had to put it in a repository. So I basically just pushed it to Quay. This also public repository, so we can later on just pull from there. Otherwise, we would have gotten into a bit of trouble because then we would have had to configure authentication for pulls and everything. We didn't really want to do that. Okay, so it's still creating. But it's fine, I prepared. I made another Kubernetes cluster before already, same thing, I just called it differently. And that way is essentially, I made this one basically before the talk started, just in case one of my nice colleagues decided to break something, you never know. So now I'm gonna use it just because it's a bit slow today. So here you basically just get your kubeconfig, give it an expiration date, I don't know, 1 month, why not? And then you download the kubeconfig, and then it's somewhere in your downloads folder. And then you, in case you already have a given kubeconfig, like me, then you can move this a bit around. So you move your one that you have already to later. We kind of need this later actually somehow. Maybe you only use one move command, you never know. Okay, and now we got our fresh kubeconfig from the download, and we're basically going to just put it here, like this, and then we can basically do kubectl get pods -a. And we'll see that we basically have a fully working Kubernetes cluster that we just clicked ourselves, where a lot of stuff is running already that we need for later in stage 5. So, whoop, like this. It's great that it's still not up. Okay, so back to the slides. You know, what I just said is basically a really nice way of getting it done. You just go and you click or you use the CLI or whatever. Please don't do this in production, especially if you're more than a one-person production team, because the next person that's coming basically doesn't know how many clusters there are, how you configure them. It's going to be really hard to actually maintain them later on. So what we want to actually do is use some kind of infrastructure as code solution, or whatever config management of choice that you like to do. So here I basically did the same thing in I basically did the same thing in Terraform, and that's basically just one way of how you would be doing this. You just configure your node pools and all these things. I guess since we just figured out that it's taking a really long time to boot it up, you kind of have to believe me that the Terraform code works, and you can check for yourself afterwards in the Git repo. What we did really want to do now is deploy the application to it that we actually had, right? So for that we have stage 1, and then we have our manifests in here. Basically I just stuck it all in one. So what we're going to do is basically create a namespace and then create a deployment, and then this basically references our application from the repository, and let's just see if that is going to work as expected. So we just do kubectl apply. Great, thank you Slack. Kubectl apply f our app. Kubectl get namespaces. Okay, wonderful. Kubernetes we can actually do. And then we created our namespace like we were supposed to. Oh. Typo. Okay, hello. Hello. Yep. Hang on, I think I somewhere had a little typo in my Docker image naming. Not a big deal. We can basically fix all of this. And here. So we're basically just going to do the build again, tag it, do this right here, and then push it. Oh, really nice. Phenomenal. Okay. So, slight problem here, and namely that the Kubernetes cluster that I created is using AMD64 nodes. So we basically have to on build specify the type that we have. I think it's like this. Thank God we can do cross-platform building. This is just going to take hopefully a small second. There we go. And then we can try to push this again on the tag. No. So, and now let's see it again. Let's get pods. Let's see, day pod. Ah, there you go. Whew. Absolutely nothing happened. Okay, there we go. And then we basically have our application that we just created running on our own fully managed cluster. So we can see that it's basically coming up here. It's starting properly, and it's basically doing stage 1 essentially the way that it's supposed to. Cool. So, if for any given reason we would like to have a bit more control, then we want our very own cluster. Make our really our very own, right? This felt like someone else did it for us. So our very own cluster really has abilities to be configured more than the fully managed ones. For the fully managed ones, you basically have to live with whatever the cloud provider gives you, which sometimes can be also a little bit hidden, especially if they build the kubelet themselves and don't put Catvisor in it, things like that. No one's naming any cloud provider that's doing that, but there are some. This also works really good on bare metal as well, right? You can basically do any server that you want and just put Kubernetes on there. So that is nice. The downside is all your operational workloads are belong to you, right? So if the node crashes, that is your problem. There's no cloud provider that's automatically just going to spawn a new node for you. Upgrades, all up to you. You can just set a feature flag on automatic updates. But it's also really fun. So what we did here, or what I did, is basically create servers, just plain sad servers that are running here. So there's basically stage 1 and 2.1 and 2 because I absolutely can't count. So we can use this nice server here that's called stage 1, despite the fact that it's supposed to be stage 2. And we can do things like kube ADM init. So maybe we can do it as root. Chances are there's going to be a bit of an issue, because this time I was actually prepared and did this up front already. So you don't really have to wait all that long. So when we do this on basically a completely fresh server like this one, we basically want to do updates, get some required packages like certificates and stuff, and then we get the release key. And we are also going to add this appropriately. And then we can use our package manager of choice to basically install the kubelet and install kubeadm and also install kubecontrol so that we can basically use all of these right now. And then if you're foolish enough, like me, to basically just assume that this will work nicely, it absolutely doesn't. But kubeadm is actually nice enough to really tell me, right? So it's basically telling me, oh, something is really wrong here, you're not actually root. So I said, okay, fine, I can do it as root, no biggie. Apparently, you also need something that runs containers, right? So in this case, you kind of need to bring your own container runtime. But there's also pretty much no big deal at all. You just use your package manager of choice, install containerd, and then we're ready to go. And then we can try again with kubeadm init. It's still giving us some errors. This time it basically wants the flag set for IP forward equals 1. We can very quickly do this. So system control, WNet, and so on, and just set it to 1. And then finally, we do actually get a working Kubernetes cluster out of this. It's doing a bunch of stuff, generating certificates, deploying etcd, and so on and so forth. And after all the nice little bootstrapping is done, it's even also giving me a kubeconfig, which is pretty cool, right? So this kubeconfig that it's giving me here, I guess we can probably just do this and use it. So export this, and then kubecontrol cat pods. The fuck? Oh, we don't have permission to that, obviously, as non-root. So what I say, export the kubeconfig, and then what happened? Never mind, we have more servers that are all prepared for us. See, that's what I meant, right? So the VMs are all for free, it's all good. So, be root again. And try it again. This might take a minute or two. Yeah, I mean, it's usually not taking a full minute. So while we wait, obviously, I fell over all these issues. So all of these little thingies that you need to do, all the stuff that you need to have, basically all going to be in the GitHub repo as well. So you don't trip over them like I did. And here we are. Okay, new server, new try. Let's see if that's going to work as expected this time. There you go, at least no error message. So we will probably not see a whole bunch of pods. Basically, we're just running a single node Kubernetes right now. That does not really have a whole bunch to do. So we, again, would like to deploy our application, essentially. So we're going to take our application like this. There you go. Kubecontrol command also finished. As I said, not really a whole bunch going on. So we're just going to put our app YAML here. and do the same thing that we did before. Control, apply, F for file, and then created this. Here it's a little bit of a different story because we don't have kubeNS installed. So basically you have to find out first which namespaces are there, and then kube control get pods -n in hello app. That's pending. Fine, we're pending. Okay, anywho. Basically, works the exact same way as it did for our fully managed cluster, right? So we did the same thing. We just created a namespace, created a deployment, created the app, and deployed it the exact same way. If you were to do this in production as well, I can only recommend you not do this by hand. So what you can do is basically do things with Ansible, for example. Hang on, it's too small again, I assume. So in case you're not familiar with Ansible, the way it works is basically you have a playbook that's saying this is what I want to do, right? So you can use ready-made tests, or like me, you basically just do a whole bunch of commands. And everything that we basically did before by hand is stuff that you can stick into your Ansible playbook. And then you have an inventory, and here you basically put the IP address on the server that you want to run it on in this case. What is happening? Phenomena. So like this, and then you can do Ansible, and you say -i for your inventory, and then you give it a playbook, and then you can hit it. Essentially, this one is most likely going to fail. For one, because we already have a running kubeADM on there. Okay, so now that we essentially have all of this done, the question is, what now? We had a single cluster, and we used kubeADM. I spared you the Minikube part because the demo was actually surprisingly fast. Under normal circumstances, obviously, it's a bit of the elephant in the room. You can obviously always just use Minikube, right? If you just need a small cluster that you can test against locally, then you just use Minikube on your given system, and that's basically just going to give you a local running Kubernetes. It's also coming up pretty fast. Obviously, the Kubernetes cluster that I run on my laptop is not really going to be good for production. So rather maybe not do that, but essentially the same thing, right? So Kubernetes watches. So next up is going to be multi-cluster. Multi-cluster is actually really fun, right? So one cluster is really cool, but maybe you have multiple sites. You do want to live on multiple cloud providers because you don't like vendor lock-in, or you just like multiple clusters for different purposes. Like, for example, you have one for stage and one for prod and one for QA. Those kind of things are what you can do. And there is different things that basically get exponentially harder from a single cluster. It's actually, deploying is linearly harder, the rest is exponential, whatever. So how to deploy your clusters? If you use the manual approach, basically more clusters means more typing. If you use the kind of Ansible or whatever config management you want approach, you just add another list of hosts and then basically have the commands run in there again. However, the fun part starts then if you think about traffic that goes to your application, right? So if you have a single cluster, you basically expose your application, traffic goes in, your application responds, everyone is happy. If you have multiple clusters, you basically have a bunch of different choices, right? So do you want to have your traffic go round robin between the clusters for your application? Do you want to say that your application has one side active and one side passive? Or do you basically just want to say, do something with service mesh? Also, data storage and sync is really not so fun. Multiple clusters. Essentially, this right here is one server where we're basically running Kubernetes, and then so this other thing right here is another cluster we're running, right? So it's actually not as hard as you could possibly imagine. And then respectively in whatever config management of choice. So again, we're doing Ansible here, stage 3. I think we're at stage 3. Your inventory file is basically just going to take a bit of adjustments, right? So basically you have multiple clusters, you need to put multiple IPs. In our case, I basically just run a single node cluster. Makes life not so super hard. That's why I said effort is basically going to be linear. So the question that I talked about is basically what's going to happen with the traffic, right? If you, oh, they gave me this nice laser pointer actually. If your user is actually supposed to send traffic into both clusters, obviously it's not going to be at the same time, right? So one request is going to land here, and one request would ultimately basically land on the other hand, on the other side. And how you would make this work is, for example, with DNS, right? You can put your DNS record in a way that basically you have an A record, and you have both endpoints behind it, and it's basically going to land on both clusters respectively. The alternative would basically be active-passive, where you can say, okay, so I basically deploy, the clicker is really nice. So you basically deploy your application simultaneously into both clusters, but you actually only direct traffic into one side, which is very well possible as well, right? So this is, for example, a nice use case if you're doing things for redundancy and failover capacities, right? So your whole cluster is supposed to handle all your traffic that you get in, but you want to have a second cluster just in case, you know, maybe this one turns into smoke and dust or gets flooded. And then the last possible option is basically to swivel around your traffic inside your cluster. Yeah. Time good. Okay. And hosted control planes is basically the last bit that we have on our list. So the idea here is really that you have a central Kubernetes cluster, and then you stick your other Kubernetes control planes into this cluster. The whole thing is basically looking something like this, right? So You have your host cluster, and then the control plane for cluster A lives here, while all the worker nodes actually live somewhere else. And then the control plane for cluster B lives here, and the worker node actually lives somewhere else. This is a really interesting model that actually works very well for scaling. There's a bunch of different open source providers that you can use to do this. I think Gartner is one, Cosmotron, I think Reddit does something with Hypershift. So we are going to actually look at Cosmotron today. So that is why we had the okay, sorry, typing and talking is really hard. So that is essentially why we had the different managed Kubernetes clusters. So we have oh look, our demo cluster is actually ready. Let's go. Let's use this. It's fresh. Why not? So what we're going to do is basically download the kubeconfig again, and then we're going to move the downloads / demo, I think is what it's called, to kube config. Here, okay, so. Nice. Okay, so stage 4. There's obviously stuff that I don't have in the top of my head, apparently. Join new token, join this all. Here we go. Okay, so we're basically going to apply this the way it is, but we can obviously also talk about it first. It's basically going to create a bunch of custom resource definitions that you need, right? So that basically your clusters are actually resources, and then the namespace, and it's going to deploy the controllers and everything. So that's why we're using Cosmotron in this case, because it's actually super easy to just have this nice ready-made YAML file from them. Oh, I thought this was supposed to take longer. So let's check. Nice, so we now have our namespace here. We kind of do need this actually. Good grief. If you can type, that's also very helpful sometimes. Okay, so we can't pull the image. Why is that? Okay, I'm not entirely sure why one of two is ready. Interesting enough. Never mind. We just move on. So the next thing that you do is basically, now that we've created all our custom resources, right? So if you do get the custom resource definitions, we can basically see that there's a bunch of different Cosmotron definitions. Amongst them also something that is called a cluster, which is really neat, right? So what we do now is ignore the EOF. And then we basically apply this one. And then we basically got a cluster for ourselves. Now, this cluster is currently not really doing anything, right? It's basically just existing as a cluster. So it would be really helpful for us if we had a node. So what we need in order to be able to join this cluster is basically create a join token request, right? So we're going to apply this join token request. Join YAML. Token request. Okay. And then we see that basically now we have all the respective secrets for our new cluster. So now all we need is basically another node that we can join to this cluster. And we are going to use this one. This one looks good. That went really well. So now we're going to go back to our cluster. So it says reconciliation was pretty much successful. And we should be able to pick up our join token now. That I obviously forgot how to find. Very nice. So what we're doing is find this command again. Join token request. Join nodes. Set a join token request. Get the secret. What is supposed to be called? My token. Like what we specified in our join token request. Oh, here it is. So we can get this as YAML, and then we're just going to do this, and everything here is basically just like this, and then like this, and our node that needs this file. We're just basically going to call it something something token. So what we're doing is basically echo the base64 stuff, base64-d it, and then pipe it to token file. Yep. And then we're going to do the command to join. Nice. And then it starts. So we basically have everything that we need for, well, some of the things that we need for our control plane. For some reason, something is broken about the controller manager, but we at least have the cluster, and we have an etcd, and then we can basically, oops. And then it is telling us already that we have a replica of one, so we basically have one node. Every new node that we would add in a similar fashion will basically end up here as well. For, I think, the sake of time mostly, I cropped some additional stuff. So this basically, like most of the other providers as well, allows you to work with certain other resources. Gartner does this with extensions, and Cosmotron is basically completely cluster API conform, so that you basically can use cluster API providers as well. So you don't really have to perform all these steps by hand. You basically just extend the definition of the cluster, and then you can create more nodes the way as custom resources as well. Okay. Okay, cool. So ultimately, what we basically figured out is we now have a Kubernetes cluster that is running the control plane for another Kubernetes cluster in it, and I could basically spawn as many more Kubernetes clusters as I want in here, which is very practical if you want to scale and you want to have a central place for all your control planes. And then respectively, the nodes are basically somewhere else, wherever you want this, different cloud providers even, or whatever. So that is basically where we're at with the hosted control planes. And that, I think, should conclude stage 4 now. Yes, that concludes stage 4, right? So what we had was the control plane in the SKE cluster. The worker node is basically the one that we bootstrapped or joined with the token. And then we can essentially use this to launch our workloads. Okay, cool. So I think that should be pretty much it for now. So we basically talked about how to get a cluster really easy, right, by getting it from your cloud provider. We talked about making yourself your own cluster. We talked about getting multiple clusters. And then we, last but not least, also talked about treating clusters as resources and deploying control planes basically to other host clusters. And that should be it. I think I timed it more than, yeah. So we should have 15 minutes for Q&A now. There you go. Are there questions? Yes. Do we actually do have a microphone? Yes, no, maybe? Yeah. Cloud Run from Google.
Yes, I just want to know which stage you would say this is, because you give it a pot and it eats a drop or something like that. Is it more than managed?
It is a little more than managed. It's still somewhere kind of around stage 1, I would say. Hang on, let me actually refer it. My little note sheets here says I'm supposed to repeat the question. So the question was Google Cloud Run, where would I put it on the stages? Because you actually just give it something and then you get it out. So it's a little more than just a managed cluster. I think it's still somewhere around stage 1 because you really still offload all the operational burden. So if you will, I would say probably an extension of stage 1 where you have to worry about even less things, but also have respectively even less control of the underlying cluster. I had a manager at Red Hat who basically referred to it as managed with a capital M, as opposed to how you would normally spell it. Cool. More questions? If you use Cloud Run and you use something like RTOS config management, is it still in stage 1? Up to you. To be honest, the stages, I mean, they're probably not hard boundaries, and they're more Kubernetes-centric than fully managed offering-centric. I think there's also a bunch of other offerings that go a little bit beyond that, where you have to take care of even less operational issues and everything. I guess for the sake of this presentation, I would say it's probably still in stage 1, I would say. Cool. More questions? Okay, if there are no more questions, then that was a... Oh, sorry, I didn't see you. Pardon? How Cube Edge fits in here? It depends, I guess, on what you want to achieve with it, ultimately. Yeah, so we did... People have done solutions in the past where they basically use the approach of hosted control planes because that is more or less working for this use case ideally, right? So if you think about something where you have a given site and that's where you need to run your workload, but it's relatively small, then hosted control planes basically give you this whole advantage, right? You can have a whole bunch of different sites, just run the worker nodes there, run your workloads there, but ultimately have your control plane in a central place where you have full control over it. This also works very well in scenarios where you're not fully in control over the hardware, right? So for example, you do software that a customer is running on their site, on their hardware, then basically just tell them to run this agent and then you're good to go. This works very well most of the time because basically the kubelet and everything that you run on a worker node just can run fully independently from the control plane if it has to. So once you basically deployed your workload there, it is not the end of the world if the connection is interrupted. Yeah.
Did you say that you do not recommend running managed Kubernetes in production at all, or just the way you set it
Oh no, I mean it's not that I don't recommend running it at all. It just depends a lot on your use case, right? The more you want to customize about your Kubernetes cluster, the less it's probably recommended. But for example, as you saw in this use case, that's definitely a scenario that I would recommend, right? So if you do something with hosted control planes, this cluster that hosts all the control planes, super nice if this is a managed cluster, right? Because if that cluster goes to shit, then essentially your cloud provider is the one you're going to yell at and not your ops team. It's just you have a little less customization and configuration options, and in certain scenarios you basically just have to live with whatever you get from the cloud provider, right? So the thing that I mentioned at the beginning, one of the hyperscaler cloud providers is basically packaging up the kubelet in a different way, and they're not giving you the full set of Cadvisor metrics unless you buy the observability package from them, and then you get a different kubelet that actually does have all the Cadvisor metrics and stuff like that. So those are kind of things that you then have to live with for the benefit of having less of an operational burden. Yeah. Hang on. The question was if we get the link to the repository. There you go. If I clicked ahead, it would have worked really well. And the other remark that I got was no, it just works after you push. Okay, there you go. QR code again. Yeah, so I just pushed it, everything should be in there. Including that I just noticed I didn't put my very professional password notepad on in there as well, but I'm going to clean up the machine so no one yell at me. Everything is confirmed. Okay, cool. Other questions? No? Okay, cool. If there are no more questions, as I said, all the code, all the YAML files, everything is basically going to be on GitHub. Slides on set, recording available soon-ish, I guess. And then I guess with that, thank you all for coming. Thank you for the questions, and have a great rest of the KubeCon.